By 2036, the national debt will reach a projected $63.7 trillion. This scale routinely triggers fears of a total government bankruptcy. A technical default is unlikely for a sovereign state that controls its own currency. Because the U.S. issues the dollar, it can always create the liquidity required to meet its obligations. The real risk involves the distinction between getting paid and being paid in something of value. A borrower can satisfy a debt nominally while returning currency that buys significantly less than it once did. Holding dollars or U.S. bonds exposes the investor to a slow, systematic dilution of purchasing power. This chart shows federal deficits as a percentage of GDP. The current 5.8% deficit is spiking aggressively past the 50-year historical average of 3.8%, an anomaly for a period of peacetime and economic expansion. These structural deficits force the Treasury to bridge the massive gap between tax revenue and spending by constantly issuing new debt. This flowchart tracks capital moving from the free market into U.S. Treasuries. When private investors buy these bonds, the government is simply borrowing existing capital. The risk profile changes only when we reach this warning node, the Federal Reserve. True debt monetization occurs when the free market demands higher interest rates than the government can afford, or simply stops buying. In that scenario, the Federal Reserve creates new reserves to absorb the debt onto its own balance sheet. Running high deficits in a growing economy signals that the entire system has become dependent on continuous debt issuance just to maintain basic operations. This dependency creates refinancing risk. Over the next few years, the Treasury must roll over massive amounts of debt, issued when rates were near zero, into a new, higher interest environment. This chart captures the acceleration of the debt load. By 2026, annual interest payments will hit $1 trillion, exploding to $2.1 trillion by 2036. Within the decade, the cost of servicing past borrowing will exceed the entire United States defense budget. This interest burden will consume over 26% of all federal tax revenue by 2036, effectively cannibalizing the budget. The national debt has evolved into a live mathematical spiral, actively consuming federal resources in real time. This matrix shows three theoretical paths out of a debt trap. Austerity and hypergrowth are often politically or mathematically impossible, leaving only the third door, financial repression. This policy holds interest rates below inflation, creating negative real yields that erode the debt's value. This leads to fiscal dominance. At this point, the central bank abandons its mandate of fighting inflation because it must prioritize keeping the government solvent. Under fiscal dominance, inflation serves as the government's primary, necessary solution to its debt obligations. Allocating capital to gold represents a rational response to the structural reality of the current financial system. Gold functions as a non-liability asset. Unlike a treasury bond, which is a promise of future payment from a government, gold's value does not rely on any institution's ability to pay its debts. This chart tracks the price of gold against U.S. 10-year real yields. There is a clear inverse relationship. When financial repression forces real yields to drop below zero, gold prices historically surge. A non-liability asset serves as an insurance policy against fiscal dominance, protecting purchasing power while the state devalues its currency. A strategic approach involves watching three specific market scenarios. Gold typically stays flat during periods of high real yields, benefits from Fed rate cuts, and breaks out during full-blown fiscal dominance. Resilient portfolios avoid concentrated bets. They maintain diversification across cash, short-term bonds, high-quality stocks with strong cash flow, and a specific allocation to gold. Investors can monitor three macro triggers to time these shifts: a weakening dollar index, falling bid-to-cover ratios, and an expanding Federal Reserve balance sheet. Tracking the transmission from deficits to real yields allows an investor to ignore headline noise, protecting capital from the mathematics of dilution.